What is inspiration porn? Have you heard that expression before? And you're like, I'm not even sure what that really means. Well, you're in the right place because we're going to be talking about that. Plus, we're going to be learning why people with disabilities or disabled people find being called inspirational is really offensive to people with disabilities. I'll be showing you some real life examples of inspiration porn. And we'll also be talking about how we can stop this pitying and this patronizing of disabled people. So I'm so happy that you're here today because I think this is a very important topic. If you don't know me yet, I'm Charmaine Tanner. I'm a parent, a retired teacher, an author of an Amazon best-selling book, The Art of Advocacy, a parent's collaborative guide to the IEP process. And I also do advocating for students with disabilities. So this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart because I'm passionate about making sure that kids with disabilities receive that education that they deserve, and that they're learning beside their friends every day in general ed classrooms. So I am glad that we can start the show. If you are with us live, say hi. If you're watching the replay, know that you can make comments and ask questions because we'll be coming back. But we'll be going through some basic kinds of information about inspirational porn. And I also have a wonderful video clip that we're going to view of a comedian and also a disability rights activist who has powerful messages that she's has shared with people on stage, and we have a video for you to watch today about it. One of my goals for my show is that I have more guests that can speak from that personal knowledge of what it's like to be a disabled person, the barriers that they see in our societies. Unfortunately, Stella died of about 4 years ago, but we can bring her virtually on through the YouTube videos and such that she's made. So I think she'll have a great impact on you, and we'll watch that in just a few minutes. I'm going to bring up some slides. The other thing I have at the end of the show, I'll share with you this calling card. So if you'd like to get the link for that, you can just type the phrase in call out in the comments, and then my bot will send you a message and say reply with the words call out, and you'll get the link. So I see we do have some live people here. So Lissa's here. Hey, Lissa, I'm glad you're with us. It's always nice when we have live guests that we can interact with. So that's awesome. The other thing I wanted to share is that this to me is also a journey that I'm on. I also have been guilty of sharing what can be called inspiration porn. And so for me, it's a learning lesson. So I don't want us to feel like, we're always saying the wrong thing or we're doing the wrong thing. I think as long as we're learning and we're making progress and we're evolving as far as how we see disabled people, that is what we want to be doing. So that's going to be our focus, is that we're also going to be learning together on our show. So let's see if I can. So the topic is inspiration porn. And we're going to start with what exactly is inspiration porn. So to me, it's when non-disabled people think that disabled people are heroes or they're brave or they have these special powers, when in fact, they're just doing what everyone does and they're just going through life and living. So when we hold disabled people up on this pedestal because they graduated from high school or because they hiked up a mountain or because they became a cheerleader, that's really not something that we want to be saying, oh, look at these wonderful things, because those are things that they could be doing if they didn't have disabilities, and they don't want to be seen as this special brave person when they are just living their ordinary life. And if you get into discussions with disabled people, they often will tell you that they find it offensive when people objectify them, when people pity them, when people patronize them. All of those things are examples of inspiration porn, which are also examples of ableism. And even though the intention might be to be nice and to be positive, the reality is when we feel sorry for people with disabilities or disabled people, we are actually not helping. We are not helping change our society and our culture as far as how we view disability. So instead of paying attention to the conditions in our society that makes disabled people's lives difficult, often what inspiration porn does is it focuses on the attitudes of disabled people, and it says that's what needs to change. When you have a positive attitude, things will be better. And as we'll see, it's not the attitude of the person, but it's all the barriers that they have every day because of inaccessible places. So let's look here. This is, one example of people, using wheelchairs. And it's like you go on vacation and you're in a new spot and it's like, how many times do you see stairs? And it's like, for us, without using a wheelchair, it's like, sure, let's go to the beach. Let's go over here on the boardwalk. But for people with wheelchairs that use wheelchairs, this, just problematic part of life when there are stairs everywhere, or wondering when you go on a new trip and you have to go to the bathroom and you're wondering if they have accessible bathrooms. All of these kinds of things make life difficult. And this is what we need to be focusing on as far as changing things for disabled people. If we look at school-age children, it's the exclusion, it's the separation, it's the segregation. That is what is making life difficult for people with disabilities or disabled people. These are the things that we need to change in order for everyone to have that life and that education that they deserve. So let's look at some more specific examples of inspiration porn. I'm sure you've probably seen videos on, the internet of, women with, or young women with Down syndrome and how they've been elected homecoming queen, or how the queen has decided to let the person with the disability become the homecoming queen. And this is what like TV news feels like, oh, this is one of those feel-good stories. Well, if it's a feel-good story and it's about somebody with a disability, then I would say that that's an example of inspiration porn. Because becoming a homecoming queen or becoming a cheerleader on a high school cheerleading team is not something that is like, wow, you are so brave to do that. I just can't believe you're doing that. That's so wonderful. All of those kinds of messages we're sending people with disabilities or disabled people are, it's like we objectify you. We look towards you for our inspiration. We look towards you to feel better. And that's not what people with disabilities or disabled people want us to be doing. Now, I don't know if you've heard of the Best Buddies program, but it's a national program, and peers are matched up with people with disabilities, and they, are active in different classes together, occasionally some after school activities together. And Cindy Crawford, that top model, she is one of the global ambassadors for Best Buddies. And I thought her quotation here was interesting. She said, "For people with developmental disabilities, the laughter and excitement of a best friend is only a dream. Best Buddies is a lifeline to the joy of having and being a friend." So again, on the surface, this may sound like, yeah, Charmaine, what's wrong with this? Like, you are being so picky. This is so good for our kids to have these special buddies that they can have at school. But every time we use that word special, we could substitute the word segregation or separate. And so many times, these kinds of friendship programs are based out of the non-disabled person feeling sorry, having that pity for the person with the disability, and they feel like this is a do-good thing to become a best buddy for somebody with a disability. So if it's based on, I'm going to feel better, I'm going to be a do-gooder, or I hear this and it makes me feel so happy and so good, usually those are signs that we're talking about inspiration porn. And that's not what we want to be doing in our communities. Now, another common thing that you hear is this one quote from Scott Hamilton, and he says that he firmly believes that the only disability in life is a bad attitude. Now, again, on some level, it might be, our attitudes are so important and this will make a difference in our life. But guess what? If you are a blind person, no matter how positive your attitude is, when you go to the restaurant and get the menu, no matter how positive your attitude is, you're not going to be able to read that regular menu, right? So it's a disservice when we look at people with physical disabilities or more invisible disabilities and think that, if they just had a better attitude, things would be better for them. And that's not the case. The reason why life can be challenging for disabled people is because of the barriers that we put up. The physical barriers, like stairs, the attitudinal barriers, like, if you just had a better positive attitude, things would work out for you. So if you are with us live or you are watching the replay, hey, Julie, type in any questions or comments that you have, and also just, what your thoughts are. Because like I said, to me, this is something that it's almost like I'm relearning some of this. I've always known that I don't want people to pity my son, Dylan. I've always known as a teacher, I'm not going to pity my kids that have disabilities. But I am guilty of sharing things on the internet that can be considered inspiration porn. And so I'm trying to learn to check that myself. And my hope is that together we can kind of help each other and be accountability buddies and help each other check that. Because it's not something that can easily be turned off. It's a way that we've been raised. It's a culture that we see all around us. And on some level, as parents, it's like, yeah, I want other people to be inspired because my child walked across the stage for graduation and walking is a big deal for him. But on the other hand, it's like, no, I want people to look at my son. I want you to look at your children and see their disability as something that you can be proud of, and not that, oh, they can do this despite having a disability. So there's this just kind of this switch in how we look at things. And it's a process. So I'm glad that you're here with me for this process, because when we get support from each other, that's when we create much more significant changes, right? So we've got, let's see, I've got a quote from Stella that I want to make sure we get in here. So this is Stella Young, and like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, unfortunately she died 4 years ago, and she was only 32. So that was incredibly sad. But she has had many interviews. If you Google her Stella Young, you'll find lots of articles written by her. She was a comedian, but also a disability rights activist. And she says, my disability exists not because I use a wheelchair, but because the broader environment isn't accessible. And you'll see in her video here in a couple minutes that she talks about how she sees inspiration porn and how we can make differences and change that up. So let's see, before we go to her video, Lisa has a comment. And she says, this is a difficult one for me, Charmaine. I am so proud of my son, but he has worked harder to get to places and things that the average peers his age. So it is difficult not to feed into inspiration. And I totally get what you're saying, Lisa. And that's why I think the more that we listen to adults with disabilities, the greater insight we'll get into this. So let me bring up her video here. It's just a 9-minute video. It's a TEDx talk that she did in Australia because she lived in Australia. So I'm going to cross my fingers that we can do all of this technology and that you'll be able to see the video.
I grew up in a very small country town in Victoria. I had a very normal, low-key kind of upbringing. I went to school, I hung out with my friends, I fought with my younger sisters. It's all very normal. And when I was 15, a member of my local community approached my parents and wanted to nominate me for a Community Achievement Award. And my parents said, that's really nice, but there's kind of one glaring problem with that. She hasn't actually achieved anything. Yeah. And they were right. I went to school, I got good marks, I had a very low-key after-school job in my mum's hairdressing salon, and I spent a lot of time watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Dawson's Creek. Yeah, I know, what a contradiction. But they were right. I wasn't doing anything that was out of the ordinary at all. I wasn't doing anything that could be considered an achievement if you took disability out of the equation. Years later, I was on my second teaching round in a Melbourne high school, and I was about 20 minutes into a Year 11 legal studies class when this boy put up his hand and said, "Hey, miss, when are you going to start doing your speech?" And I said, "What speech?" You know, I'd been talking to them about defamation law for a good 20 minutes. And he said, you know, like your motivational speaking. You know, when people in wheelchairs come to school, they usually say, like, inspirational stuff. Yeah. It's usually in the big hall. And that's when it dawned on me. This kid had only ever experienced disabled people as objects of inspiration. We are not, you know, to this kid, and it's not his fault. I mean, that's true for many of us. You know, for lots of us, disabled people are not our teachers or our doctors or our manicurists. We're not real people. We are there to inspire. And in fact, you know, I'm sitting on this stage looking like I do in this wheelchair, and you are probably kind of expecting me to inspire you, right? Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint you dramatically. I'm not here to inspire you. I'm here to tell you that we have been lied to about disability. Yeah, we've been sold the lie that disability is a bad thing. Capital B, capital T. It's a bad thing. And to live with disability makes you exceptional. It's not a bad thing. And it doesn't make you exceptional. And in the past few years, we've been able to propagate this lie even further via social media. You know, you may have seen images like this one. The only disability in life is a bad attitude. Or this one. Your excuse is invalid, indeed. Or this one. Before you quit, try. Yeah. These are just a couple of examples, but there are a lot of these images out there. You know, you might have seen the one, the little girl with no hands drawing a picture with a pencil held in her mouth. You might have seen a child running on carbon fibre prosthetic legs. And these images, you know, there are lots of them out there. They are what we call inspiration porn. And I use the term porn deliberately because they objectify one group of people for the benefit of another group of people. So in this case, we're objectifying disabled people for the benefit of non-disabled people. The purpose of these images is to inspire you, to motivate you, so that we can look at them and think, well, however bad my life is, it could be worse. I could be that person. But what if you are that person? I've lost count of the number of times that I've been approached by strangers wanting to tell me that they think I'm brave or inspirational. And this was long before my work had any kind of public profile. They were just kind of congratulating me for managing to get up in the morning and remember my own name. And it is objectifying. These images objectify disabled people for the benefit of non-disabled people. You know, they are there so that you can look at them and think that things aren't so bad for you, to put your worries into perspective. And life as a disabled person is actually somewhat difficult. We do overcome some things. But the things that we're overcoming are not the things that you think they are. They are not things to do with our bodies. I use the term disabled people quite deliberately because I subscribe to what's called the social model of disability, which tells us that we are more disabled by our bodies, the society that we live in rather, than by our bodies and our diagnosis. So I've lived in this body a long time. I'm quite fond of it. It does the things that I need it to do, and I've learnt to use it to the best of its capacity, just as you have. And that's the thing about those kids in those pictures as well. They're not doing anything out of the ordinary. They are just using their bodies to the best of their capacity. So is it really fair to objectify them in the way that we do, to share those images. People, when they say, you're an inspiration, they mean it as a compliment. They mean it as a compliment. And I know why it happens. It's because of the lie. It's because we've been sold this lie that disability makes you exceptional. And it honestly doesn't. And I know what you're thinking. I'm up here bagging out inspiration. You're thinking, geez, Stella, aren't you inspired sometimes by some things? And the thing is, I am. I learn from other disabled people all the time. I'm learning not that I'm luckier than them, though. I'm learning that it's a genius idea to use a pair of barbecue tongs to pick up things that you drop. I'm learning that nifty trick where you can charge your mobile phone battery from your chair battery. Genius. We are learning from each other's strength and endurance, not against our bodies and our diagnoses, but against a world that exceptionalizes and objectifies us. I really think that this lie that we've been sold about disability is the greatest injustice. It makes life hard for us. And that quote, "the only disability in life is a bad attitude," the reason that that's bullshit is because it's just not true. Because of the social model of disability, no amount of smiling at a flight of stairs has ever made it turn into a rap. Never. Smiling at a television screen isn't going to make closed captions appear for people who are deaf. No amount of standing in the middle of a bookshop and radiating a positive attitude is going to turn all those books into Braille. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. I really want to live in a world where disability is not the exception but the norm. I want to live in a world where a 15-year-old girl sitting in her bedroom watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer isn't referred to as achieving anything because she's doing it sitting down. I want to live in a world where we don't have such low expectations of disabled people that we are congratulated for getting out of bed and remembering our own names in the morning. I want to live in a world where we value genuine achievement for disabled people. And I want to live in a world where a kid in year 11 in a Melbourne high school is not one bit surprised that his new teacher is a wheelchair user. Disability doesn't make you exceptional, but questioning what you think you know about it does. Thank you.
Ideas. What happens to the ones?
So, what do you think? I would love to know your reactions to watching that. Like I said, I think one of my goals is to make sure that we have more disabled students and adults on our live show, because those are the voices that we need to be listening and learning from. So what are your initial reactions to that video? And I think, Lisa, like you were saying, it's almost like this, how do we wrap our brain around some different way of looking at things? And so to me, rewatching this video is one way that can help kind of cement that into your brain, or learning and talking with more disabled adults and what they would like their life, how they would have liked their life to have been different. So we can make sure when we're raising our children that we look at ways that are going to be positive ways, that are going to be ways that we can help create change in our schools and in our communities. And instead of, feeling sorry for our kids because they have a disability, instead, I would like our kids, ourselves, and others to see that disability as that is part of who they are. And we want to be proud of that versus saying, despite them having, Down syndrome, look at what they've achieved. But again, this is not something that's common. So it's a process. It's an evolution. And I am walking on this path, and I am not that far ahead of anyone else. I am behind a lot of people, but I'm here to be transparent and honest with you and to show you that there are ways that we can change our thinking and our attitude. So that's what I am looking forward to as we move on with creating really positive change in our cultures. So that was our video. We're going to talk just real briefly about how you can stop inspiration porn. Because when we, perpetuate it, it's not going to be helping any of us. It's not going to be helping our children. So the first thing that you can do is to recognize it. And it's not that this fidget spinner is inspiration porn. I just grabbed this as an image. But we want to be able to see a video on Facebook and say, oh, that really would go under the category of inspiration porn. And we get kind of sucked into this of like, oh, isn't this wonderful? But we've got to recognize it for what it is. And it is something that really objectifies people with disabilities or disabled people. And that's not what they want. That's not what we want. And then the second thing that we can do to stop inspiration porn is to call it out when you see it. And not in, mean, aggressive ways, but just to help others recognize that that is something that disabled people are not wanting. And it can be harmful. Now, like I said earlier, that I'll share with you in a few minutes a calling card that you can use when you see inspiration porn and you want to create some dialogue about that. And I'll share that with you here in a minute. If you want to get that calling card, just type in the phrase call out in the comments. And then my bot will send you a message and say, reply to this message with the phrase call out, and you'll get the link. It's from a really awesome group on the website that is mainly talking about invisible disabilities. But I think it would be helpful for all of us. So if that's something that interests you, make sure you type in call out. Now, the third thing that, I went ahead about here. The third thing that we can do is to make sure that we take some kind of action. So first, we want to recognize the inspiration porn. We want to call it out, and we want to take action. And the way that we do that is one is just having these conversations and trying to sort things out for ourselves, and having other people that can help have that dialogue and that conversation to say, well, what is this really based on, that we feel sorry for people with disabilities, that we feel sorry for disabled people, or is my reaction based on something else? And so just that reflection can be an action step that you've taken. So today we've talked about inspiration porn. We've talked about what it is as far as non-disabled people, thinking that disabled people are heroes or brave or extraordinary just because they're doing their ordinary life, living their ordinary life. We talked about why inspiration porn is offensive to disabled people. They feel like it objectifies them, and that's not something that we want to do to people. We looked at some examples of inspiration porn: the homecoming queen, the cheerleader, the person that excels in sports, even if they have a physical disability. And that is part of learning to recognize inspiration porn. And right now we've talked about 3 different things that you can do to stop inspiration porn. And that is to recognize it, to call it out, and to take action. So let me go over here and see if we have some comments that I can share with you. So Lissa says, well, she's responding to what Jill had said, so let me put up Jill's too. Special need proms, what is your view? Our kids go to public schools, all should be included. Yes, Jill, that's another point, and I was going to bring that up as an example. And this is something that I feel like when we have special things, when we have special proms, those are segregated proms. Those are separate proms. So anything that is special, segregated, separate are not things that I'm going to be in favor of. And this is speaking as a parent. We also have to look at the viewpoint that our kids have. But because our son Dylan was always included like 100% of the time in general ed from preschool through college, Dylan went to his high school prom when he was a junior. Dylan went to his high school prom with friends when he was a senior. To me, that's the appropriate time that we go to proms. Now, Dylan receives community supports as an adult. He's 29 years old. And because some of the people that are supported in this agency did not go to their high school proms, the agency, and you see that other, groups and football players will have these special proms, throughout the country. And to me, it's like, that's not what we do as adults. When we're 29, when we're 45, we're not going to special proms. Yes, you might want to get dressed up, and yes, you might want to go hear music, and yes, you might want to dance with your friends. But let's look at what other typical people do when they're that age. When you're a teenager, the typical thing to do is go to your high school prom. When you're an adult, the typical thing to do is to, find, different venues in your community, different bars where there's dancing, different concerts, things like that, instead of having this separate, segregated, special activity. So, and then let's see what Lissa, So Lissa says that she took her son to Night to Shine, which is similar, and he loved it. And so that's where, I think that conflict comes in for me, Lissa, because it's like, so if our kids love that, so does that mean then that is something that we want to continue? And so what I look at is there another typical activity that is not just for people with disabilities that your son would enjoy? So, and here she has another comment. She says, I get it, but my son spent half the night in the calm sensory room at the Night to Shine. It was altered to fit his needs, and he loved it. And so, I think I respect you, Lissa, as a parent, and I respect you for this is something that, was important for my son. There were accommodations so he could enjoy the event. And then I just want to make sure that are there other ways that we can turn in events or, change events and venues around, our communities where people don't have to go to something separate in order to get their needs met, in order to feel comfortable. So what my mission is how can we look at what the typical activity is? How can we make that more inclusive? So your son would go and he would have a space that would be quiet and, maybe not all the lights and everything like that. And then he could return, into the dancing part, when he wanted to. So my goal is to make things in our culture, in our society more inclusive and not to perpetuate the separate things. But as, another parent, it's like I know and I respect, what parents think is best for their kids. I think when our kids are in high school, they need to be the ones that have the voice and make the decisions. And so I think that's critically important, is that we look at what other people are saying. And Lissa says, like the movie theater, special movies for kiddos with autism. Yes. And it's like, so how can we change that? So it's not like I only can go to a movie when they have these special nights or these special filmings. What are other ways that we can, because those are like environmental barriers, and that is what causes the problem. And those are the things that I'm hoping that we could change. And Jill is saying yes. So I wanted to share with you this calling card that I found on the name of the site, and I'll have to put my glasses on here so I can read it, but the name of the website is Invisible Disability Project. So this is a card, and it's meant for people that are disabled to use. But to me, I think it's a great idea for, there's a little bit of the verbiage on the back that you could change, and it could be helpful for you to have too. So the reason why I think something like this is helpful, it's not like we're going to be rude and, every time somebody says something, we're going to go, we're the inspiration porn police. We're going to cite you for using inspiration porn. To me, when we're learning something new, it's like we need, an accommodation. We need some help to give us the words and to remind us of what we can say in conversations. So that's what I see the purpose of this card is. And, they have it's hard to see here, they have the word ableism on it, because when we look at inspiration porn, that is actually one form of ableism. And ableism, like racism and sexism, are things that we don't want to perpetuate. So here's what the card says on the back. And like I said, you can adjust the message, but it says, "Dear friend, I am disabled. I am sure you did not realize this when you made, laughed at, agreed with that ableist remark, or behaved in that ableist manner. Like racism, sexism, ableism is a cultural bias that impacts disabled people in their everyday lives. For example, being called a retarded, lame, or crazy is offensive to people like me and my friends." And it goes on, and then I'll read here at the end. It talks about instead of being considered argumentative, I distribute these calling cards to signal when ableist remarks or behavior arise. If this card causes you discomfort, imagine how much your ableism is causing me discomfort. So again, just type in the phrase "call out" if you want to get a copy of this. I think it's something that we need to revisit. It's not something that's going to always just kind of roll off our tongues. So if you have a calling card like this, it's something that you can keep in your wallet. You can kind of, go back and reflect on it. I encourage you to Google Stella Young and find some of the articles that she's written about inspiration porn. Or if you just Google the word inspiration porn, you'll find a lot of articles. And I'll share some of those in our membership group too. But I would love for you to reflect on our conversation today, the video that you saw, and see how you can start recognizing inspiration porn. You can call it out. You can take action to change, because that's what we're all about. So thank you so much for being here. We will be back next Thursday at noon Mountain Time. I'm Charmaine Tanner, and I am so grateful that you are part of our community. So thanks for being here, and I shall see you next Thursday. Take care.